Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this August 5th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. You can listen to my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. They also play the show at 11 a.m. Pacific time, Monday through Friday. And if you can't get those two shows, please go to my website at arcticbeacon.com, and you can get shows going back over a decade regarding the Vatican-led New World Order. Now, I've been doing a series on what I call the biggest stage play ever produced in the history of the world, and that's the 2016 presidential elections. Now, I'm going to suspend that until next Tuesday, as I mentioned yesterday, and present parts 4, 5, and 6. And I've got a lot of emails on it. People are enjoying, and I think a lot of people are getting the drift that we're watching a big, huge political Hollywood movie. And so with that in mind, I was going to have Bert Krantz on from the Alamo Ministry today, as I mentioned yesterday, and he had a personal issue to take care of and can't make it with us today. So I'm going to reschedule him for next week. So I thought I'd do a little sideshow today regarding some information that I presented, almost a month ago. And I think it plays hand in hand with one of the biggest issues facing the American people today, and that is this rise of ISIS, the terrorism. We've talked about many times about how ISIS has been formed, and many of the main actors on the stage in this political election 2016, this presidential election 2016, are in fact responsible for the creation of ISIS, i.e. Barack Hussein Obama and Hillary Clinton's policies. And even the other actor for the Republican Party, Mr. Trump, has pointed out and said that the actress Mrs. Clinton should get an award for being the founder of ISIS. We won't go into that, but in the backdrop of all this, people are probably wondering, you're hearing on the news, they're showing you maps of the spread of this Islamic, radical Islamic terrorist movement. They've moved into what they're calling now almost 20 countries, and they showed the map. Well, I thought you'd be interested to see, and we're also talking about many things regarding Islamic populations in the countries around the world. So I thought you might be interested, again, to hear an analysis that was done about what happens to countries depending on the amount of Muslims in that country. Now, this is not a racist view. This is just an analysis done regarding the numbers of Muslims in a certain country going from 0% to 100%, and what the country's political and social policies look like. And so I thought you might be concerned about that. And listen up to it, because it's quite interesting. Here we go. Let me play it for you. Here we go. He says, "We proclaim that we will conquer Rome like Constantinople, and it will be conquered again. We'll rule the world, as has been said by Prophet Muhammad."
A demographic tidal wave is washing over the West, and the vast majority of people coming to demographically replace indigenous Western people are of the Islamic faith. Already, the adherents of this ideology have begun to displace native populations within cities, and projections hold that the Muslim population will continue to grow exponentially. But unlike most civilizations that were Islamized, it will not be by the sword alone, but via the Muslim womb and the pathological altruism of the West, who through taxation and redistribution are funding their own colonization. With an exploding Muslim population, jihadist terror attacks are becoming ever more common, and terrorists that murder in the name of Islam are very clear about their motivation as well as their goals. They unleash violence upon disbelievers to fulfill violent jihad and wish wholeheartedly for Islam, as is instructed by Allah in the Quran. And they're very careful to explain this. But it would seem those in controlled media and the political class do not want to listen to the jihadists themselves, but instead provide their own explanations for Islamic terrorism. Leftists want you to believe it's poverty, rightists want you to believe they hate our freedoms, Sam Harris wants you to believe that Islam is inherently violent, Ben Affleck wants you to believe that any questioning of Islam is racist, Muslims want you to believe it's only a tiny and unimportant minority. Thus, the comical script for the aftermath of whenever the next Islamic terror attack comes seems already to have been written and mostly agreed upon. Step 1, tearful, sad cartoons need to be published. Step 2, Facebook flag filters for whichever country is bombed. Step 3, crying on TV of citizens, newscasters, politicians, whoever. Step 4, lighting up some buildings as well as a candlelight vigil. Step 5, the media will incessantly push how Muslims are the real victims, as their faith has been hijacked by those that don't understand the real Islam and are living in fear of a backlash that never seems to materialize. Step 6, wait for the next jihadist attack. Wash, rinse, repeat. The West has been lying to itself for so long that it's come to believe its own lies. It was Samuel P. Huntington who very accurately described Islam and its relations with others in his book, The Clash of Civilizations. In Eurasia, the great historic fault lines between civilizations are once more aflame. This is particularly true along the borders of the crescent-shaped Islamic bloc of nations, from the bulge of Africa to Central Asia. Violence also occurs between Muslims on the one hand and Orthodox Serbs in the Balkans, Jews in Israel, Hindus in India, Buddhists in Burma, and Catholics in the Philippines. Islam has bloody borders. Wherever Islam comes into contact with other civilizations or other religious communities, it's rarely peaceful. Islam is not a religion like other religions. In its fullest form, it is a complete and total system of life. Islam has religious, legal, political, economic, social, and military components. In the book Slavery, Terrorism, and Islam, The Historical Roots and Contemporary Threat, written by Dr. Peter Hammond, and it explores the topic of the impact that an increasing Muslim population has on a society. As long as a Muslim population remains under 2% in any given country, they will, for the most part, be regarded as a peace-loving minority.
Okay, and those countries are 2% or less. The United States, 0.6%. Australia, 1.5%. Canada, 1.9%. China, 1.8%. Italy, 1.5%. And Norway, 1.8%.
And not as a threat to other citizens. This is the case in these countries. At 2 to 5%, they begin to proselytize from other ethnic minorities and disaffected groups, often with major recruiting from jails and among street gangs.
Okay, and those countries that have 2 to 5%, according to Hammond's research, are Denmark, 2%, Germany, 3.7%, United Kingdom, 2.7%, Spain, 4%, and Thailand, 4.6%. And probably these are statistics, I think, that are on the low side.
This is happening in these countries. From 5% on, they exercise an inordinate influence in proportion to their percentage of the population. For example, they'll push for the introduction of halal food, thereby securing food preparation jobs for Muslims. They'll increase pressure on supermarket chains to feature halal on the shelves, along with threats for failure to comply.
Okay, and in these countries with 5% to, I believe, 8 to 10, France has 8% Muslims, Philippines 5%, Sweden 5%, Switzerland 4.3%, and the Netherlands 5.5%.
This is occurring in these countries. When Muslims approach 10% of the population, they tend to increase lawlessness as a means of complaint about their conditions. In Paris, we are already seeing regular mass car burnings.
Okay, and in these countries of 10% or more, And Hammond's taking stats and looking at the social condition in these countries. So he's not making it up. In Guyana, there's 10%. In India, 13.4%. Israel, 16%. Kenya, 10%. In Russia, 15%.
Non-Muslim actions that offend Islam result in uprisings and threats, such as the Charlie Hebdo massacre, also in Paris. Such tensions are seen daily, particularly in Muslim sections in these countries. After reaching 20%, nations can expect hair-trigger rioting, jihad militia formations, sporadic killings, and the burnings of Christian churches and Jewish synagogues.
Okay, and this is occurring with 20% or more of the population, between 20 and, I believe, 35. In Ethiopia, there's 32.8% Muslim population.
Such as in Ethiopia. At 40%, nations experience widespread massacres, chronic terror attacks, and ongoing militia warfare, such as in these countries. From 60%...
Okay, that was Bosnia, and let me see if I could find... I missed that. So let me see if I could find that. Yeah, Bosnia, 40%. Chad, 53.6, Lebanon, 59.7.
In militia warfare, such as in these countries. From 60%, nations experience unfettered persecution of non-believers of all other religions, including non-conforming Muslims, sporadic ethnic cleansing, use of Sharia law as a weapon, and the jizya, a tax placed on infidels.
Okay, and in 60% or more, Hammond's referring to Albania, 70% Muslim population, Malaysia, 60.4%, Qatar, 77.5%, and the Sudan, 70%.
As in these countries, after 80% expect daily intimidation and violent jihad, some state-run ethnic cleansing, and even some genocide, as these nations drive out infidels and move toward 100% Muslim.
Okay, in these countries, this is a long list, so let's go over them. Bangladesh, 83%, Egypt, 90%, Gaza, 98.7%, Indonesia, 86.1%, Iran, 98%, Iraq, 97%, Jordan, 92%, Morocco, 98.7%, Pakistan, 97%, and Palestine, 99%, Syria, 90%, Pakistan, 90%, Turkey, 99.8%, United Arab Emirates, 96%.
Such has been experienced and in some ways is ongoing in these countries. 100% will usher in the Islamic House of Peace. Here, there's supposed to be peace because everybody is Muslim. The madrasas are the only schools and the Quran is the only word, such as in these countries. The first rebuttal...
Okay, and countries that have 100% Muslim population are Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, and Yemen.
To these observable behaviors is that to criticize the ideology of Islam is to have a problem with Muslims as people and is usually framed by tying the criticism to race. It's much easier to do this than to accept the very uncomfortable fact that Islam is very different from other religious traditions. Another common tactic is to claim that, well, all religions are the same. In the U.S., religious fanatics have killed people at abortion clinics. Well, yes, some of the killers were religious, there's no doubt about that, but consider the scope of the problem. There have been 6 deadly attacks over a 43-year period since the legalization of abortion in the U.S., with 10 people having been killed, 3 of those just last year. More people were killed in one bomb set off at the Brussels airport in March 2016, let alone the thousands of other jihadist attacks that have happened around the globe since 9/11.
And let me add one thing. He's dealing with, he's not even getting into the subject of false flags and how that certain radical groups can be used by the CIA or the powers that be that create these incidents, and not only from the point of view of some of the abortion clinics that were bombed, but when you look at some of these false flags in Brussels and other places, like I said before, even if they're not, if they're a false flag, the message is the same to the masses.
The next criticism to pointing out these behaviors by Islamic extremists would be to say, well, yes, well, maybe most terrorists are Muslim, but not all Muslims are terrorists. Yes, of course, many nominal Muslims are themselves ignorant of the most violent aspects of Islam and want nothing more than to live a peaceful life in the West. As individuals, Muslims are free to dismiss the parts of Islam they find distasteful via the guise of context. But the same question can be easily turned around. If Islam is a religion of peace, then why is it the only one that consistently produces religiously motivated terrorist attacks? Why are there literally thousands of Muslims that are ready to strap a suicide bomb to their body and walk into crowds of innocent people, scream Allahu Akbar, God is greater, and murder indiscriminately? Muslims and their apologists can believe whatever they want about Islam, but this does not change what Islam, a documented ideology, has to say about itself. Moreover, there are very troubling signs coming out of the already massive, established Muslim communities in the West. For example, 20% of British Muslims sympathize with 7/7 bombers, 16% of Muslims in Belgium state terrorism is acceptable. 26% of younger Muslims in America, 35% in Britain, 42% in France, 22% in Germany, and 29% of young Muslims in Spain believe suicide bombings are justified. And 45% of British Muslims agree that clerics preaching violence against the West represent mainstream Islam. Muslim Americans who identify more strongly with their religion are 3 times more likely to feel that suicide bombings are justified. 19% of Muslim Americans say that violence is justified in order to make Sharia the law in the United States. Following the November 2015 attacks in Paris, 1 in 4 young Muslims in Britain say they sympathize with those who fight for ISIS, and an astonishing 2/3 of British Muslims would not turn a terrorist into police. And it goes on and on and on and on. Yes, of course, for most of the statistics cited, the majority of Muslims do not agree with an extremist interpretation of Islam. However, sizable minorities do, and they make up millions of people, and in most countries, the second and third generation of Muslims are more radicalized than their parents. And with the flow of Muslims ramping up into the West by the millions, social, criminal, and cultural problems are set to explode, literally and figuratively. And for the imposition of Sharia, no motion, debate, or approval by a bicameral parliament is necessary. Sharia has already arrived.
Children across Britain are being exploited for sex by organised gangs in growing numbers.
Muslim patrols are again active in London, with vigilantes trying to impose Islamic ideals on the local population.
And while do you feel that you are British?
I identify myself as Muslim. If I was born in a stable, I'm not going to be a Muslim.
We are Muslim Patrol. We are in North London. We are in South London, East London, and West London. We command good and we forbid evil. Islam is here in London. Mr. David Cameron, Mr. Police Officer, whether you like it or not.
A woman in a short skirt is abused.
I'm so...
We don't care if you're a cool at all.
Muslim
I'm
Patrol.
meant to marry in Great Britain.
This we don't care. It's not so Great Britain.
A man the patrol thinks is gay is insulted.
Get out of it quicker then. You're dirty, mate. You're a gay, mate. Get out of it, mate.
London what it calls the appalling abuse of at least 1,400 children over a period of 16 years, from 1997 to 2013. It details children being raped, trafficked, beaten, and sometimes doused in petrol. The inquiry says almost all the perpetrators were of Pakistani heritage.
So they look for fertility. I'm not even going to repeat that. Basically, he's echoing the same statements that I translated for you in the first part. So let's finish that and move on.
نغمة نوصيكم يا أيها الألمان، يا أيها الأمريكان، يا أيها الفرنسيون، يا أيها الطليان.
In the wake of the 2015 Paris attacks, the Molenbeek municipality in Brussels was described as a Muslim no-go area, where gang violence and Islamic radicalization has fed off the neighborhood's festering resentment of authority. In 2015, Belgium's Home Affairs Minister said that the government did not have control of the situation in Molenbeek, and that terrorist links to the district were a gigantic problem. The neighborhood has found notoriety as a hotbed of violent jihadist ideology. In Sweden, the rape capital of Europe, the small town of Östersund, I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, has called off Earth Hour this year. Earth Hour, which started in 2007 as a lights-off event to raise awareness about climate change. But turning off the lights in this tiny town is too dangerous for Swedish women. Why is that? Well, authorities have lost control of the city and women are being sexually assaulted in alarming numbers. While police won't comment on the perpetrators, as is the case in most Western countries, all of the victims claim their rapists were not native Swedes. Victims ranged from adults to young girls, and attackers remain on the loose. Women all over formerly peaceful Sweden are now being told to walk in groups or with a chaperone, and not to walk alone for fear of gang rape. In Birmingham, Sharia courts operate in the shadow of British law, offering rough justice for Muslim women. But ironically, there are fears that if Sharia courts were to be closed down, they would just appear underground, making it harder for them to be regulated. It's said that there are some 85 such courts in Britain, but the actual number is unknown. A central German regional railway is launching a special women and children-only area for their trains on their Leipzig and Chemnitz route. The compartment will also be next to the onboard office of the train guard or ticket inspector, and the company said the local proximity to the customer service representative was chosen deliberately. This is again in response to the massive surge in sexual assaults on women and children attributed to the Islamic migrants pouring into the country. Also in Germany, schools have banned revealing blouses, shorts, and skirts in the name of modesty to help prevent migrants from sexually assaulting school children. And even in the United States of America, the leading cable news channel CNN, like most other controlled media outlets, has been forced through fear of violence to uphold Sharia law and its prohibition on any likeness of Muhammad being publicly displayed. Just after the Charlie Hebdo massacre in again Paris, CNN blurred images of the magazine that had the cartoon depictions of Muhammad. But CNN was not alone, as virtually all controlled media outlets did exactly the same thing, following the injunctions of Sharia, and censored the cartoons. And you can find example after example after example of creeping Sharia in the West, from non-halal food bans to Islamic street patrols, honor killings, gender-segregated swimming pools, polygamy, and more. Don't kid yourself, Sharia has already arrived. People tend to forget that Egypt, Syria, Turkey, most of the Middle East, in fact, was at one time Christian. The same goes for Kosovo. There is no way around this. All demographic projections lead to the same conclusion. If there is no dramatic shift in policy, then there will be an Islamic future for Western Europe. Islam is not coming to integrate any more than European settlers that arrived in North America intended on assimilating to Native Americans' customs and way of life.
Okay, we'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
The book of Revelation says, "The spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ." This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal on this August 5th, 2016 day on our calendar.
And I hope that information helped you. Statistics from Hammond's book, so go and get that book. And you can also listen to this video. It's called Creeping Sharia, and you can just Google that and listen to it again. A lot of good statistics. I think it also explains, if you follow the presidential elections and what Obama says about what's going on with these radical Islamic attacks as presented by the mainstream. You'll know now why he doesn't even want to call it radical Islam. He's sympathetic, and perhaps his goal is to bring Islam to America for reasons that aren't good. Well, anyway, anytime I present the following information, that is, did the Vatican create Islam? Or what are the similarities between Roman Catholicism and Islam? I try to give you the best information. There's not that much out there. And I'm going to have to call again on Walter Veith and former Jesuit priest Alberto Rivera for probably the best information out there. And I find it really suspicious that major historians never touch this subject. And people, when you talk about the Crusades or anything that has to do with what was going on back when Islam and Rome were at war, the Knights Templars, etc., in Jerusalem, and the whole story there, we never really get the story of the Crusades, only from the aspect of the Vatican and Christianity mounting an effort against Islam. But in a sense, we never hear about how the Vatican mounted an effort to destroy Judaism and Bible-believing Christianity.
And is it a possibility they created this enemy in Islam to do their dirty work? Let's call on Walter Veith to show you the similarities, and then also we'll talk about Alberto Rivera's, who's a former Jesuit priest who had inside Vatican information. And there's a lot more hiding in the Vatican library, I'm sure. So let's go back and listen to Walter here. And this is going to take a couple days. So I want to put a collection together so you have today and tomorrow to send out to people, also to digest. So let's listen as Veith gives you some really good information. Here he goes.
The Islamic Connection is the name of this lecture, and it's quite a story. The Islamic religion is huge today, and it has some very fascinating features. It's a very exclusive religion.
Well, let me mention one thing. This was done in 2004.
Nobody from the outside is allowed in. If there are pilgrimages to Mecca, only those of the Islamic faith are allowed to go to these pilgrimages. It is an exclusive religion. Evangelism in Islamic countries is totally forbidden. This religion has full control of the entire territory which it controls. Now, who and what is Islam? Millions of people make the pilgrimages to Mecca, where they worship at the shrine of Muhammad. What a privilege it is for them to make the pilgrimage. There's another religion which also propagates pilgrimages, and that is Catholicism. So you have pilgrimages to Lourdes and the Marian sites and to Fatima. Pilgrimage is a symbol of the great pagan religions of the past as well. Now, who was Muhammad? Muhammad Mustafa was born in 570 AD and he died in 632 AD. He fled to Medina in 622 AD after Khadija's death. Who was Khadija? Muhammad married Khadija when he was 25 and she was 40 years old. Her cousin Varakwa was a Roman Catholic, and she came from a Roman Catholic convent. So we could say she was a Roman Catholic nun. She was super rich. She lived in a convent, and she had the whole of the economy basically in her hand. And she employed this young man, Muhammad, whom she then also married. Muhammad marched on Mecca in 630 AD, 2 years before he died and 4 years before Umar became Caliph. And the Quran was compiled in 650 AD. And Muhammad, who couldn't write himself, had a scribe to write down what he saw and what he heard. And the Quran is different, apparently, from all other religious writings because it was a directly dictated book. So it is not just transcribed by a prophet, so they teach, but it is the very word of God, and therefore it must always remain in its original Arabic language. That is what is taught in the Islamic religion. The symbol of Islam is the sickle moon and the star. The star within the sickle moon. Now, where does this symbol come from? And who is Allah? Well, let's go to some interesting quotes also from encyclopedias of religion and etc. Allah, he was the moon god who married the sun goddess. Together they produced three goddesses who were called the daughters of Allah. These three goddesses were called Allat, Al-Uzza, and Manat. The Encyclopedia of Religion mentions that Allah is a pre-Islamic name corresponding to the Babylonian Bel. Fascinating. So this is an ancient pagan religion, and Bel, or Baal, is the deity. We read in Morals and Dogma, page 451, the Arabian word Aldebaran means the foremost or leading star, and it could only have been so named when it did precede or lead all others. The year then opened with the sun in Taurus and the multitude of ancient sculptures both in Assyria and Egypt, wherein the bull appears with lunet, festival of the first new moon, when the year opened with Sol, the sun, and Luna, the moon, in Taurus. And the symbol of Taurus is that one over there. The crescent and disk combined always represent the conjunctive sun and moon. That means basically the male-female deity. Adoration of the celestial cow, Mered, there's the all-seeing eye, the eye of Osiris. Here are the horns, there is the disc in the horns, and it also represented the plunging of the sun god into the womb of the mother to be born by Isis. So the horns are also a representation of the moon, the sickle moon. So in later religions, or from Babylon itself, Assyrian style, there you have the half moon with a solar disk in it. The same over here, enlarged. Note that this is Baal Hadad, the birth of the sun. If we go to Mesopotamia, we'll find the old symbol of Baal and Bel was exactly the same, the half moon and the star in it, representing the birth of the sun. Isis and Osiris, the male-female aspect. So this would be Ashtoreth and Tammuz, or Isis and Horus, the male-female. The same you find in Egyptian, as we have already discussed it. This is Baal worship. This is Lucifer worship in his male-female form. Now, the papacy has exactly the same thing, because the Pope is today the representative of the Babylonian religion. So when he says the Mass, he has a round wafer disc. Its roundness coming as a symbol of Baal. And after a Mass, it is placed in a monstrance, which is a half moon. So then you have the birth of the sun, and you have it symbolized in this form. Here's another monstrance in which the host is placed, representing the birth of the sun. So Catholicism uses the symbol of the half moon with the sun or the star in it. Here's a Roman Catholic church in Germany, and it has this interesting clock on it, which I photographed. There's the moon, and there is the star. And this particular star here has 8 points, and as this clock moves round, of course, every time, the long arm and the short arm intercalate, you have the birth of the sun god. Baal Hadad, Baal Hadad, Baal Hadad, every now and then, every hour of the day. Very interesting. So the symbol of Catholicism is the moon and the star, hidden, of course, in many other symbols as well. Now, this ancient religion existed before Islam, and the initiates of this religion, as we saw in Morals and Dogma, were the insiders, like to Mary, and she has the holes in her hands. Mary is always depicted as coming out of a cave. Now, the ancient deities always came out of a cave. Loyola, the Jesuit, received all his information in a cave, and it is interesting that Muhammad received all of his information in a cave. That's paganism. That has nothing to do with Christianity. Now, here we see in Islamic countries, in this particular one over here, we have this strange structure over here, and we have a statue of Mary on top of it. And Mary there appeared, apparently, as this little gazelle. But before the king shot it, it changed into Mary, and she told him to build a monastery. And that she did, or that he did, and there is the monastery high up on a hill. Now, whenever I find a monastery high up on a hill, I'm very interested, because high hills were pagan high places, where they sacrificed to pagan deities. It is interesting that all the cathedrals in the world are built on pagan places of worship. Even the Vatican is built on a pagan site of worship. Nothing has changed. So when I came to this particular place in the Middle East, I went to look for the ancient place of worship, and sure enough, on the hill, there it is, the triple arches of the ancient deity of sacrifice in the cave, as per usual. It's interesting that Mary always appears in the cave. In Fatima, she's in the cave. In Lourdes, she's in the cave. The Pope is always visiting the cave and worshipping in the cave. As Osiris represented the sun in Egyptian law, Isis represented the moon, but the truth is that Osiris represented the male active generative powers of nature, while Isis represented the female passive or prolific powers. That's Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. So it's actually a form of nature worship. These people would do well in the Bohemian Grove, worshipping the trees. The Templar revelation identifies Isis as the Black Madonna on no less authority than a former head of the Priory of Zion. The Black Madonna cult is century to the Priory of Zion. To them, at least, there is no doubt about the significance of the Black Madonna. You see, Osiris was both black and he was white. And he's worshipped as black and he is worshipped as white. Mary is worshipped as a black Madonna and as a white Madonna. So we have all these interesting nuances. The Hittites used the symbol of the half moon and the solar deity. This symbol today, of course, is used by none other than the United Nations. Well, let us travel to an Islamic country today. Here is a Catholic cathedral in Amman. And I'm photographing this Catholic cathedral standing at the mosque. So I'm standing on the ground of the mosque and I'm photographing the Catholic cathedral right opposite. Now, it's interesting how Catholicism and Islam stand side by side in all the Islamic countries. And every time, I'm so surprised to see the cathedral and the mosque next to each other. You see, if you know the inside religion, behind the scenes, they're actually the same. So if I look at the symbolism on the outside of the Catholic cathedral, I have the symbol of the sun, because it was the symbol of the sun worship. And the cross, of course, the symbol also of the sun god. And there is the symbol of the sun. If I go across the street, and there is the great Abdullah Mosque, one of the finest, built by King Abdullah. On the gates, you have the symbols of the sun. Same symbolism, same religion. On top, of course, now here you have the moon, the sickle moon, which the Catholic Church had on the clock. It was a symbol of Baal, or Baal. Inside this mosque, there are, of course, no pews, because in Islam, you bow down and kneel on the floor or on the carpet. And if you look up at the tremendous dome, you have again the great solar blazes in this wonderful building. Islamic dress, well, you can look at old-fashioned Catholic nuns and you will find that the dress is identical. Catholic nuns wear the same dress as Islamic women of Orthodox faith. This is the great mosque in Damascus. Fascinatingly, inside the mosque, right inside is the shrine, and there is a Muslim man praying at the shrine.
Okay, we're going to break that off, and I hope you enjoyed that. And you can get more of Walter Veith's great stuff. Just Google Walter Veith, and he'll give you a good overview about the similarities between Catholicism and Islam. Now, I did mention that I said Barack Hussein Obama, who's playing the role as the big actor, the actor president. Well, he is doing his acting job, as I mentioned in my series regarding that I'm doing right now. Regarding this. But the one question I said to you, is he actually helping ISIS be created? Is he trying to bring Islam to this country? Well, recently there was a story that just broke, I mentioned it last week, that he sent over $400 million to Iran. He sent it over in cash on pallets at the dead of night in exchange for hostages. That money's going to go directly to terrorism. No president would do that. He's also got another $1 billion going to them, on top of the $1 billion that he's given them with this crazy Iranian nuclear deal, which is going to make them a nuclear threat within a very short time. And Clinton backs this. So we have something very serious going on, folks. And I hope you listen to the first part of the show, where it talked about what happens in Islamic countries, what happens when their populations rise. This is not something to just be overlooked. You have to look at Barack Hussein Obama, his policies throughout this whole his whole presidency has not only created ISIS, but he's even afraid to call it Islamic terrorism, radical Islamic terrorism. Then he gives all this money to them, knowing, and his administration admitted it's going to be used for terrorism. What is the matter with these people? And think about it. The United States courts have already ruled that there's $43 billion owed by Iran to the victims of Iranian terrorism. Why didn't he give the money to them? There's really something strange going on. He's playing a very big lead role in what I call the biggest political stage play ever created by man. The presidential elections, 2016. And continue my series. Go to it next Tuesday. You're going to hear all about it. Monday, I got Leo Zagami on from Rome talking about that coup in Turkey. Have a good weekend. Back next week on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.